Hello and welcome to TelecomTV from the Mobile World Congress discussion zone at MWC 17 and our panel discussion on the importance of standards for the development of 5G. And joining me to discuss the subject, I have on my immediate right Tetsuya Nakamura, who is Principal Systems Architect at CableLabs and very recently now Vice Chair, one of the three Vice Chairs at the SDN&NFV ISG.
Yes.
Tetsuya, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Next to Tetsuya is Manish Singh. And Manish, good to see you again too on TelecomTV. Manish is Vice President, Product Management, SDN and NFV at Mahindra. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, TelecomTV has been closely monitoring the progress of development of 5G for some time, and as we've discovered, there's an incredible amount of pressure being placed on the standardization, mainly to accelerate this technology. But we've also got the issue of open source and open standards coming in. It's very complicated, it's very pressurized, but can I ask, first of all, and Tetsuya, I'll ask you first if you don't mind, how have standards managed to endure in the telecoms industry for so long?
Yeah, actually, many people may ask a question like, which one is better? Is a standard or open source approach in agile or de facto standard or de jure? But I would say it's a little bit stupid question because I think so how to take each advantage is very, very crucial. So from an operator's point of view, I would say at the end, operator needs some explicit description, requirements. So it means standard is very, very important. Even though to accelerate the 5G, some of the open source approach is necessary. However, so I would say more concrete requirements is needed. So in this sense, I don't think standard is dying. Standard is still keep it. And how to leverage the open source more quickly, realize a reference point or reference platform is also, some of the win-win collaboration relationship can be done. So in this sense, standards never die.
So Manish, from a vendor's perspective, why are standards so important? Why have they endured and continue to endure?
Yeah, I think if you look at 5G, if I look at the transformation pillars, there are three pillars I would put in. There is the new radio on the 5G NR, you have the new architectures, and then there is a question of hyper-automation. So if you take those three pillars and then you start really looking at the question of standards versus open source and how do we achieve those objectives, it's very clear to me that when we talk about radio interface and 5G NR, that has to go through the standardization process because that's how we achieve the economies of scale, we achieve the diversity on the device side, going forward on the IoT ecosystem and more. It is absolutely essential that we get that interface properly defined and standardized to achieve that scale. I think then you come to the second piece, which is on the architectures. And the real question there is a role for the standards to play. I think HC is playing that role, but there is also a role for open source to play to create an environment that is truly agile. And that really gets the telcos, the service providers, to start doing things differently, what the web scalers have done. So there's that very important shift where you see things moving from pure play standards to a hybrid model of standards plus open source. And then the third leg, which I think gets the least talked in the industry but is becoming the most important, which is hyper-automation, machine learning, AI, how do we bring those capabilities and get these networks to the point where we're talking about 20 billion, 50 billion, etc. devices to be connected. That third piece becomes absolutely essential, and that's going to be, again, open innovation is going to play a key role in there. So that's how, I can see why this debate is happening. There's a role for standards, there's a role for getting this hybrid agile model in place so that we can get this industry to innovate at a much faster rate than what we have done historically.
Yeah, I fully agree with especially his Manish first point. So one of the totally different nature of a telecom industry from IT industry is at the end, each operator need to secure their interoperability each other, even though, their customer need to go to the outside. So, but still their customer need to ensure to interconnect to their home gateway. So to do so, more well-defined interface like S1 gateway or GX1, so that might be standardized. Otherwise, if each operator build up their own system agile, it's quite difficult to synchronize, to synthesize each other. So that's why more top-down standard approach is necessary. That's his point, and I fully agree.
So at what point do we leave the standards and look at innovation, or if you like, proprietary layers that will then differentiate an offering?
So I'll probably take a stab at that, right? So if you look at the different layers in the architecture, you have the connectivity layer. I think that's where the standards are going to play a key role. Again, you want the interfaces to be well defined, etc. Get the interoperability in place. But I think once you get into the service layers where you're defining the services, I think that's where the innovation becomes very important and the speed and agility becomes very important. And I also then start tying that back, when I look think of architectural frameworks like NFV, right? That really gives you the framework in which you can do a lot of agile development, agile services, and rollout, right? And that's key. Same thing I see now on the edge side with mobile edge computing. I think that's going to create these frameworks where you can do much higher development. And I think that's where I see the lines getting drawn the right way. I think as we move forward as an industry, that's the way to, I think, go about it.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you look at the connectivity aspect of 5G, this is where we agree that standards are very important. They're driven at the moment predominantly through 3GPP, and yet if you look at 10 years ago and 20 years ago, at previous iterations of cellular, it seems there's a lot more pressure this time around to go faster. Does this mean that we get a watered-down approach, that we can't do everything, because the pressure to go faster means we can't do everything in a finite length of time, therefore we might still have a standard, but it's not the standard we might have wanted?
Yeah, actually, that's I think relevant with Manish's second and third point, because given that from 1G and 2G, 3G and 4G is just purely radio, pure key technologies transformation. However, so from a transportation from 4G to 5G is not only for radio, more business transformation, especially a new business model and a new user story behind. So that's totally different nature of a condition, and the environment is a drastically change. And the telecom industry is a business model itself. So that's why, as he pointed, so more agile style, more accelerate, like machine learning or how to automate it, all those kind of maintenance OEM function is not only radio. So that's why I think, so not only pressure to 3GPP, but all the industry, not only telecom industry, but more new industry like automobile or healthcare or education, anybody in the very keen to get into that rather than beyond their radio. So that's one of the totally different nature of that, I think.
Yeah, I think I'll probably build on that. I want to take a little long-term view of how things are going to evolve. If you look at the previous generations, right, what were the services predominantly? We started with voice, text messaging, data, and within data we then got into the app world, right? And that's the set of services we were thinking about. 5G is really now expanding that horizon with IoT, and now you've got all these different kinds of things that are going to come. That means that when you think from an interface perspective, you think from protocol layers perspective, all the use cases you will not be able to nail down on day one. So the standards themselves need to become more agile and need to evolve depending on the market needs that the service providers are addressing. And architecturally, on the network, and we talk about this now, and I'm seeing tremendous, interest and requirements coming from the service providers to do things in a more microservices way, so that I can put interface 1, protocol 1 today, and yet tomorrow if I have a new application that I want to address, that I should be able to plug in that interface and those protocol extensions, so on and so forth, instead of get it right the first time 100% and then we're going to deploy this and live with this for the next 5-10 years. I think the evolution and the agile aspect of the network, the use cases, and hence the standards have all to change, and I think that's what I think 5G is going to achieve, and if it has to be successful, it must achieve.
We'll come to some of the technologies that will underline these use cases in a moment, but we look at 5G and we think NFV, SDN, two critical technologies to further 5G. Tetsuya, from the NFV ISG, how much of the standardization and development work that you're doing is dictated by 5G needs, and how much is it the other way around?
I think from a virtualization, NFV and SDN point of view, one of the couple of key features from an NFV point of view necessary to take into account. For example, as also Manish said, that the network slicing, how to decouple each different requirements, because each use case requires a totally different nature. That's one aspect will be ultra low latency, and another one is ultra very very high security, and the other one is that ultra high availability thing. So that's a totally different requirements. How to deal with the existing one physical network is very very crucial. So in this sense, from HNFV point of view, so maybe we need to argue on the such a key features like network slicing and more automation, and also cloud native design principle. So those kind of things will be more seriously taken into account, because at the end, nobody ensure there's such end-to-end system integration. So that's a very important thing.
Manish, Tetsuya has just mentioned network slicing there. It's one of the relatively new technologies and approaches that 5G is introducing and bringing on alongside, I guess, also multi-access edge computing and others. What else might we be expecting to see?
Yeah, I think, I think the SDN&NFV becomes the foundational pillar. I think building on top of that is network slicing, because we do want to get to a point where you have ability to slice the networks to really create horses for courses, if I may put it that way, because of the varying use case needs. Edge becomes extremely important. Mobile edge computing, multi-access edge computing is key for a very simple reason. For the service providers to try to go head-to-head against the cloud providers, that's not a winning game. It's the location, it's the latency that are the friends for the service providers, and edge becomes critical. Applications that have key low latency requirements, things like AR, things like video, things like gaming. Edge becomes important, and it becomes an opportunity for the service providers to really enable third-party applications to come in and monetize that. So I think that. The other thing which is very key now on the road to 5G is NFV so far has done tremendous work and good progress on the core side, IMS and core. But if you look at the CapEx and OpEx budgets, it's the RAN.
Yeah.
And next piece that we need to go and really solve is the virtualized RAN, get past the CPRI interfaces, virtualized RAN architectures, so that we really attack and solve where the biggest bang for the buck is.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be key, and keep an eye for that one.
Yeah, because edge computing is very, very important from a latency point of view, but also very important to reduce traffic in the backhaul traffic. Because at the end, so operator need to take care of how to reduce the cost, CapEx and OpEx. So how to reduce the traffic? Because a bunch of the traffic in the AR and VR is coming. So how to save our traffic in the backhaul? As long as all the traffic is beyond in the edge side, at least backhaul side can be reduced. So that's also our operator's expectation to a more distributed architecture.
Other aspects of standards and the rate of standardization, the fact that standards take a while to develop. I guess it's okay for some of the large vendors and the large operators who can finance the development work, but for a lot of the innovative smaller startups, they can't bring to market, can they? They've got to really wait, I guess, until standards are complete, which then means, well, can they afford to develop in the first place?
And I think that's what we're seeing, a shift in that approach, even in the world of NFV, which is pre-5G. We're seeing now that you have the traditional vendors, the scale providers on the vendor ecosystem, like the tier one, so, equipment providers, they continue to, offer products and solutions. But you're seeing a whole new set of disruptors that are coming in. Whether you look at it from a core network side, you look at it from an IMS side. Right here at Mobile World Congress, we're showing some solutions on voice over LTE. We're doing one on mobile edge computing. So you're now seeing these disruptors coming in, whether it's voice over LTE, core networks, edge computing, for that matter, virtualized RAN. We're seeing that shift, and that shift has to accelerate. If the industry wants to continue to really accelerate the pace of innovation, right? To me, that's a necessity now.
Yeah, that's exactly operator's expectation. So somebody newcomer is coming in this very conservative telecom space and disrupt everything and broken and disrupt the new ecosystem looks like. However, so from an operator's point of view, we are still struggling to look for the how and who can dive into that space. Because given that telecom industry is everything is very slow, and even procurement and everything, small startup companies are a bit difficult for themselves to sustain until they get their real business from an operator. So that's why those kind of more appropriate ecosystem is achievement is not only vendor support, but operator need to change from inside, including a procurement process and the development process, to allow a more agile style. Otherwise, even we are pushing and expecting so hard to NFV and SDN, it's not coming without operator cannot change ourselves. So.
Yeah, and one thing, if I may add, right? The proof's in the pudding, right? When I say the connectivity layer and that you need to have the standards, and I think the interfaces and the protocols need to be defined, that's good. The piece on the automation side, especially how do you automate and get to hyper automation, the proof's in the pudding with what we just saw before coming to Mobile World Congress with the Linux Foundation announcing Open Ecom and OpenO being brought together as ONAP, right? And for us, even from a Tech Mahindra standpoint, we are now the premium platinum sponsors in there. But the real point being, get it open, get it out there, innovate in an open way, get the automation done in an open way, and make it readily available and leverage the entire ecosystem that can start contributing to it, right? And I think that's really what's going to take the industry to the next level. So I think that's a great example of how open source, open innovation is going to play a key role for the next gen networks on our road to 5G.
Yeah, actually, that's one question to you. Yeah, I strongly believe open source is very valuable, but from a vendor's point of view, how to get their business based on because open source is open source, everyone can take a look at and leverage that. So how to differentiate based on the open source? Sometimes it's a very big challenge because you guys have lots of resources and spending time and develop a very good open source like OpenStack basis. However, at the end, you need to get their money from an operator.
So I think here's how you look at it, right? Today, if you go back into 3G and 4G world, right, the standards have been written, stacks of papers have been written on every interface, every protocol, and if you want to do anything, everybody starts developing a piece of software from scratch.
Yeah.
Open standard changes that game completely.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody's got a much higher level on which you start, and then the question becomes, how do you monetize it, how do you productize it? There are opportunities, and we've seen that with Linux world, for example. If you look in the Linux world, and that's a much smaller scale, but you have opportunities to productize it. You have opportunities to add capabilities and features on it. So if I take that approach at a much larger scale, right, and I say, no, the service providers need support on, they're not just going to take an open source and try to build it on themselves. They need the vendors to take that, productize it, support it, and enhance it. And that's where the opportunities for differentiation are going to come in. So we're going to see the shift. We've seen some of it with Linux. If I go back, 10, 15 years back, we went through that journey whenever, like Linux in a carrier network, no. And today it's everywhere, right? So I think it's that shift, but at a much larger scale that is ahead.
I see.
Now, we talked connectivity, we talked services, we talked hyperscale. We can't end a 5G discussion without looking at spectrum, I guess. This is going to introduce whole new frequency ranges, that we've not used before, and they do have complications attached to them. The higher up you go, the more complex it gets. So what are your thoughts about the spectrum we're going to be using with 5G and its approach to standards there?
I think that's maybe I can speak on behalf of the cable industry because now I belong to CableLabs. Spectrum regulation is a little bit different in the Asian country and the European country and of course in the United States. But as long as in the cable industry in the United States, we are very keen to get the new auction, 3.5 gigahertz. So 3.5 gigahertz is one of the huge possibility or potential to leverage the such a new small cell capability in the metropolitan area. Because given that for example, if cable operator is dive into this mobile space, they need the spectrum obviously. However, so they don't need to cover whole the United States because the more rural area is a little bit difficult based on the investment, but revenue-wise it's quite difficult because the population and the density is not so good. But the East Coast and the West Coast especially is a very dense area. That's a really business area, not only consumer but also business, enterprise. So from a United States point of view, I think 3.5 gigahertz is one of the big portion of that. But not only cable industry, but also any OTT player are also very keen to do that.
Yes,
so that's a very competitive and hot topic from end of this year to next year, I would say.
Manish, last word on standard.
So I think we can just have a whole panel on spectrum, so I'll keep it sharp and crisp. Multiple things. Number one, standard itself. So you have the opportunities on licensed spectrum versus really unlicensed is going to play a much bigger role. And as we go up, and I think in US, for example, we're now seeing especially 60 gigahertz, millimeter wave, that's unlicensed, and 5G is going to tap into that. So licensed, unlicensed, shared. That's one way. The other way is, we're talking about different use cases. Deep coverage, IoT, much low data throughput, much lower cost point versus ultra high throughputs, and that's where I think you will have lower spectrum bands that can give deep coverage at much lower cost points, but you don't have a lot of bandwidth available, so small chunks of spectrum versus going into 28 and 30 plus gigahertz in those bands. That's where we have much higher bands available. Those will be leveraged for high throughput. The challenge again is propagation in there. So the real point is it's going to be a mixed bag. In terms of spectrum, I think we're going to get past the 6 gigahertz for sure in case of 5G, and NR is going to attack that. And a lot to talk about that. I'll for now, I'll leave it at that.
We'll leave that for MWC 18, shall we? But gentlemen, both of you, thank you very much. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.